In the gloom of mighty cities, midst the roar of whirling wheels, we are toiling on like chattel slaves of old, and our masters hope to keep us ever thus beneath their heels, and to coin our very lifeblood into gold. But we have a glowing dream of how fair the world will seem when each man can live his life secure and free. When the earth is owned by labor and there's joy and peace for all in the commonwealth of toil that is to be. They would keep us cowed and beaten, cringing meekly at their feet. They would stand between each worker and his bread. Shall we yield our lives up to them for the bitter crust we eat? Shall we only hope for heaven when we're dead? But we have a glowing dream of how fair the world will seem when each man can live his life secure and free. When the earth is owned by labor and there's joy and peace for all in the commonwealth of toil that is to be.
Come all you good workers, good news to you I'll tell, of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Daddy was a miner, now he's in the air and sun. He'll be with you fellow workers till the battle's won. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Across this great old nation, tell me what you gonna do when there's one law for the rulers and one law for the ruled. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a lousy scamp, or will you be a man? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Don't scab for the bosses, don't listen to their lies. Poor folks ain't got a chance unless they organize. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side?
Welcome, everyone. We'll just give it another few minutes for people who are just joining us. For everyone just joining us, we'll get started in about 3 minutes.
As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, a million darkened kitchens, 1,000 mules gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people here are singing bread and roses, bread and roses. As we come marching, marching, we battle to for men, for they are in the struggle, and together we shall win. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies give us bread, but give us roses. As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing, their ancient strive for bread, small art and love and beauty, their trudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we're standing proud and tall. The rising of the women means the rising of us all. No more the drudge and idler tend that toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories,
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So we're gonna get started now. Thanks again for coming to celebrate May Day with us. We're Speak Out Now, a revolutionary socialist organization. We believe capitalism, a system rooted in the exploitation of the majority for the profits of a few, is the cause of the problems we see all around us. We also believe it's possible and absolutely necessary for the working and poor people of the world to overthrow this system and create socialism, a system of democratic control of the world's resources. In order to succeed, we'll need organizations that are actively fighting for our revolution by the vast majority. All of us here today can and must participate in changing the world. We host events like this to discuss the problems that confront us today and examine what we can do about them. Today, we're here to celebrate the power and possibility of the working class. First, I'll share the history of International Workers' Day. Then we'll hear from comrades in two organizations of our same tendency, an activist with l'étincelle, meaning the spark, a fraction of the French New Anti-Capitalist Party, or NPA, and the Revolutionary Socialist Organization, RSO, in Germany and Austria. Next, we'll hear a spoken word piece by a San Francisco Bay Area artist, and our final greeting will be from Partido Obrero, or Workers' Party, in Argentina. So please stay with us until the end for announcements and the playing of the Internationale, the anthem of the International Revolutionary Workers Movement. Unlike our usual town halls, there won't be a discussion section of this event. However, there will be an informal discussion after this event ends that all are welcome to join. So first, a brief history of May Day, a history that's been stolen from us in the United States. On May 1st, workers around the world celebrate the struggles and victories of the working class, a holiday that was born in the United States in 1886. The 1880s here was deemed the Gilded Age for the thin coating of gold that covered the morass of social ills, child labor, sickly slums, and immense poverty. 10% of the population owned roughly 3/4 of the wealth, and the bottom 40% of the population had no wealth to speak of. 16-hour workdays, intermittent unemployment, and extremely dangerous working conditions were the norm. US industry had the highest rate of occupational injuries and deaths in the world, with no healthcare or social support whatsoever. By the mid-1880s, the working class was fighting back. At first, against wage cuts and other concessions, but slowly starting to strike against overall working conditions, the boss's right to hire and fire workers at whim, and long hours on the job. The movement for the 8-hour day spread like wildfire. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what you will was the slogan. At this time, most trade unions were very conservative and only organized a small section of skilled workers. They strongly opposed the strikes. The Knights of Labor was founded clandestinely in 1869 by 9 workers in Philadelphia. 17 years later, it had a membership of over 1 million, organizing all workers regardless of industry or race. Their slogan was "An injury to one is the concern of all." They believed wage slavery needed to be ended and replaced by cooperatives. Socialist and anarchist militants who opposed the entire capitalist system were active and often leaders in these movements. They believed the overthrow of this system of exploitation could be achieved through the self-organization of the working class. On May 1st, 1886, tens of thousands of workers took it upon themselves to organize for a mass mobilization for the 8-hour day against the wishes of the national officials, of trade unions, and of the Knights of Labor. Nearly 250,000 workers went on strike or held mass rallies and parades around the country. In working class cities like Chicago, tens of thousands rallied. The movement spread to rural areas as well, and many of these struggles were successful in winning a shorter workday. Strikes continued, and the police became increasingly violent in their repression of these movements. On May 3rd in Chicago, the police fired on a mass meeting of workers, killing 4 and wounding 200. The next day at Haymarket Square, 3,000 people rallied to protest the killings. Dynamite exploded from within the police regiment, and the police fired on crowds again. In the aftermath of the Haymarket massacre, radical activists and organizations were blamed for the explosion without evidence and were severely repressed. Despite this repression, the working class had gained a valuable lesson of class struggle and solidarity, and a young generation of radical workers formed the basis of the US socialist organizations, the Socialist Party and the Industrial Workers of the World. 1886 was called the year of the Great Uprising of Labor. To commemorate this and other struggles, the Second Socialist International voted to designate May 1st, 1890 as International Workers' Day. Since then, workers around the world have demonstrated on this day against wars and for working class demands, and to stand in solidarity with workers around the world. In the US, demonstrations of hundreds of thousands were organized up to the 1930s, but the powerful boot of US anti-communism tried to erase the celebration of May Day. Union officials and politicians instead designated Labor Day in September as the official US workers' holiday. They filled it with patriotic picnics and parades where we're supposed to be grateful to work for the bosses. But May Day continued to be celebrated elsewhere around the world. It was only within the last decades that May Day has made a significant resurgence in the United States, first around the opposition to the Iraq War, and then in 2006, when immigrants and undocumented workers organized a Day Without Immigrants as a demonstration of the power and importance of immigrant labor. In 2012, Occupy Wall Street brought new life to May Day as well. Today, the working class is over 3 billion strong. We do all of the essential labor that makes our society run. Over 900 million of us grow the food we all eat. Nearly 700 million of us produce the items we use every day. There are 60 million workers in healthcare, and millions more workers are responsible for transporting all of the goods, food, and medicines we need. If workers of the world folded their arms for a day, the whole world would come to a halt. It would be a day without transportation, healthcare, sanitation, manufacturing, childcare, electricity, and so much more. We do the essential work to make society run, but we do not have the power to decide how it is organized and who benefits from our labor. Those who control the corporations and banks and the politicians who represent them organize our work to serve their interests. They want to hide our collective power from us. They want us to only see ourselves as individuals, consumers, voters, and spectators. They want us to believe that the only way we can make change is to choose from the options they've already outlined for us within the parameters of their system. But things don't always go their way. Over the last 2 years of the pandemic, workers in healthcare, transportation, logistics, and food production were either made to accept the dangers forced on us at work or to organize a response to protect our health and the health of our communities, coworkers, and families. In the US, there were many small walkouts by workers refusing to accept these conditions as the government pushed us to return to the new normal. There's been a small but significant increase in strikes over the last year, especially last fall. By the end of the year, more than 100,000 workers had gone on strike in food processing, manufacturing, healthcare, transportation, oil refineries, and education. In Brookwood, Alabama, 1,100 coal miners are still on strike after more than a year. This spring, we've seen workers organize their own independent Amazon union and organizing in places like Starbucks. We can hope that this organizing and mobilizing increases in the next period. Today, we know that we face great challenges. By every measure, this system is showing its refusal to address the needs of people around the world. It is literally destroying the world. This week alone, we witnessed record-breaking historic droughts in Western United States and whole regions of Africa. In South Asia right now, temperatures are almost 115 degrees Fahrenheit. These temperatures are enough to cause the human body to shut down. In a world where there is enough food to feed 10 billion people, over 2.3 billion people are food insecure. Famine is on the brink of killing millions across regions of Africa and in Afghanistan and Yemen. The war on the people of Ukraine has put the horrors of war on full display. The brutal assaults on the people of Yemen, Syria, and Somalia and elsewhere, but are hidden from us, may continue with no significant media coverage. Along with these major challenges, great possibilities for the future also exist. We have the power and possibility to organize our forces to end this global capitalist system that exploits and oppresses us around the world. We need to organize that power, and that's the task before us today. So with that, happy May Day. Now we're going to hear from those active in the struggle in other parts of the world. We'll start with an activist from l'Étincelle, meaning Spark. Nat is a member of the new anti-capitalist party, the NPA, which ran Philippe Poutou as a candidate in the most recent elections in France. Poutou is an unemployed worker and campaigned on the basis that workers' power is not in the ballot box. It is on the job and in the streets. Nat, who lives in the south of France, will be presenting about the political and social situation of France, particularly in the context of the elections, which have gotten a lot of attention this year. So with that.
Thank you very much. So you've probably heard about the French presidential election. No suspense, Macron was re-elected. So after 5 years, it felt like nothing had changed. Macron against Le Pen once again. But that was just on the surface, for many angers have crystallized against the figure of Macron during these past years. In the hospitals, after movement in the emergency services before COVID-19 hit the planet, but also during the catastrophic management of the crisis, during the Yellow Vest movement that threatened the power of Macron and his government, followed by a strike movement, particularly in the transportation sector, but also among teachers and other professions against a pension reform that lasted for 2 or 3 months. The movement of youth against climate change and the inaction of politicians should be mentioned as well, the growth of women participating in demonstrations against sexist violence, and finally, following the murder of George Floyd and the demonstrations against police violence in the USA, there were many similar demonstrations against police violence in France. Should you want to understand more about all this, the website of Speak Out Now has many articles about all these movements. For now, I will just say that in all these movements, we tried, anytime we had the possibility to do so, to enhance what we call the auto-organization of the people, a democracy where people would decide and vote for what they want, but also would coordinate themselves, and why not on a national level. During strikes, particularly in the transportation sector, but also among teachers, in hospitals, or in the youth, we tried to push so that the strike belongs to all the strikers and is not led by union apparatus that would rather negotiate a dead end as much as possible than follow the desires of the workers on strike. But all in all these movements show that there is anger, both social and political. And we felt that it was the right thing to bring this anger also to be heard during the elections, that there should not be a discrepancy between the political debates during the campaign and the experiences lived for 5 years and the situation of millions of workers and young people. As you may or may not know, the elections in France take place every 5 years, and there tend to be many candidates. We had 12 this year. The war in Ukraine somehow eclipsed the programs of the candidates, and rightly so, maybe, given what was in those programs. But it did not prevent them, the candidates, to develop their flag-waving rhetoric. The question of refugees also became a hot topic. Politicians who had been famously anti-migrants, the well-known "we cannot take on all the world's destitutes," slightly changed their position. Ukrainian refugees are like us, they have our culture. You can also read under that they are white or non-African. Some reflections, however, of international solidarity among workers emerged. Some saying, yes, Ukrainian refugees should be welcomed in good conditions, but the government should not prioritize some refugees over others. Workers have not been dupes of this hypocrisy that ranks refugees according to their origins. Furthermore, the preoccupation with the war in Europe matched the anxiety over inflation. Prices have been increasing, particularly the price of gas. For the anecdote, this was a match that had sparked the Yellow Vest movement. What the government did was paying 50 cents for 1 liter of gas, something we cannot obviously refuse, but that was clearly not enough. So this is the situation that the political campaign took place into. The whole year saw the rise of Zemmour, a misogynistic journalist that is constantly piling up a string of historical errors verging towards negationist positions, and who is, most of the time, always on a real crusade against Muslims. He's not the only one in this crusade. Even Macron had his fair share in it, but Zemmour pushed it to a whole other level, allowing Le Pen, the traditional extreme right candidate, to appear soft and moderate. Marine Le Pen downplayed her usual racist stances against immigration to adopt a more social profile, which in a way worked. It would not be accurate to compare our election to what happened with Trump in the US. Here, people voted for Le Pen because they are sick of Macron. Well, almost everyone is, including people that voted for him. So some people had decided to vote on the left in the first round, then extreme right on the second round to avoid Macron. A surprise of this election, however, was the amount of vote on the left for Mélenchon. He is a 70-year-old guy that appealed to many young voters, even though he's been part of a socialist government in the past. The French socialist, the socialist party that's been in power, not the American socialist. So many among the poorest voted for him as well, for Mélenchon. In the outskirts of cities, in the Parisian region, he almost got half of the vote, or in ultramarine territories such as Guadeloupe. Many also that were interested in the anti-capitalist and revolutionary campaign made by the two Trotskyist candidates eventually voted for Mélenchon, even though our meetings were packed. After the results, many people were angry that for the second time, after 2017, the left was not present in the second round. This is particularly true of students, some of whom gathered in universities or even occupied their buildings. Not only did they reject the extreme right represented by Marine Le Pen, but they also rejected the continuity of Macron with his anti-workers authoritarian politics. Students refused the political blackmail, the pressure of what we call the Republican barrage, or the Republican bloc. This is not exactly new as a position, but it took an important role this time. People were less ready to give a blank check to Macron to fight the extreme right, given that he rather helped consolidate this extreme right. So after 5 years of this progressive liberal Macron, we're having the extreme right now divided, very strong in idea, and that might very much grow as regards its militants. So eventually Macron was re-elected and two options seemed to emerge. Other elections again. The legislative are coming in June, and there might be the possibility to have a left opposition in parliament. While this garners some enthusiasm, such a union around Mélenchon, the one I talked about, would not relieve the burden that capitalism places on the working people. Mélenchon's program is far from radical and does tap into nationalist ideas, thus participating in not creating a greater class consciousness among the workers of France. This illusion of a savior or a group of supreme savior disguised as members of parliament has to be fought against. Our future is in our hands and in the battles that we will fight for our living conditions. So May Day, tomorrow, should be the day to start saying this, all the more since hundreds of young people flocked to our meetings, and even more since many workers are striking for better wages, in an isolated manner so far, but numerous. May Day is a day to fight for our lives, for the amount of hours we're making at work, for the age at which we will retire, and this will be a hot topic in France next year, and for the wages that we get. It's a day to fight against the power of capitalists to decide for our lives. As such, in France, workers should then prepare the future battles against Macron, but more generally against all that world and the people who do not want to change it.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing that with us. So now we're going to hear from Drew, a well-known San Francisco Bay Area poet and spoken word artist. He's joining us today to bring his words and insights to our celebration today. So welcome.
Hello, everyone. You have to forgive my green screen. I'm not sure what is going on there. But anyway, it must be May 1st, optimum day for workers to display worth, join hands and expand around the world and survey girth. Quite often, the cacophony of variety leads to an array burst, relishing and embellishing past examples hitting pay dirt. Demonstrations led police battle with tactical on display. Historical samples of examples throw the irrational drama away. Moments that foment more than just a fashionable entree, an elevation of celebration and international holiday. Embroiled and toiled with Chicago police, a forewarned scuffle. Bosses with a law enforcement endorsement, a tightly formed couple. Prestigious with exploited riches, a sanctioned, adorned hustle. Revolutionary spirit torn from the rubble, born out of struggle. 12 hours plus is what soured the trust. Only owners are pain-free daily. Even when they express concern, stress in turn, lesson learned, aim seems shady. Killed 4 workers, wounded 70, their identity labeled mainstream crazies. More than just hyperbole in adversity, 8-hour workday from the 1880s. Out of their feelings, late to the game, emotionless and tardy. Glorious, victorious, inertia to try and dispose of this hardly. Not bought out, but well thought out to approach this smartly, capitalists mortified by workers organized, sparked by socialist parties. Political asylum is an astonishing sabbatical prism, one of the many intrepid methods admonishing radicalism. Considering reformist buffering opposed to restructuring is like coddling impractical wisdom. Instead of extend the cult, the end result should be abolishing capitalism, a direct response to worker exploitation. The sensation of a foundation, precursor demonstrations, rejected supposed bargaining, mergers with stipulations, designed and meant with fine print and no further explanations, employers raging on this joyous occasion, reminder of potential power, pretending like they can't hear our chants in their provincial towers. We are the peasants in the 11th essential hour, preventing big business from having the existential devoured. Quite pitiful how individuals amass industries. We gain assurance and endurance from our past histories, enough to be racking up and stacking up working class victories. We've traveled far, battle scars, marching down the path gingerly, or on all accounts, small amounts, ready to pounce like caged panthers, who never relied on the contrived, assuaged banter. Our simple questions, their 1,000-paged answers, fought for a model to follow minimum wage standards. We've dealt with characters that have racy connections, with big stick walk and slick talk and union heads with hasty suggestions, arbitrators and judges stenches from benches and flaky rejections. Never easy to create and liberate through workplace safety protections. No time to get softcore and consider this a lost war. Billionaire bosses acting like rock stars off tour. Minimized taxes, maximized profits, products still cost more. No exceptions, concessions are not given, but fought for. The haves spar tough. That's why battles are rough. Time to get starstruck over the workers at Amazon and Starbucks. Hold your union cards up. Global workers, over 3 billion participants, consisting of millions of immigrants. Inherent built-in incidents make us feel like we're fill-in indigents. The fact that we're hindered by corporate interests makes us sort of kindred. Forming a union led to constant bombardment, reported endless. This exemplifies individualists are subjected to lies, hoping the rest comply, but to collectivize will rectify. Enough already with the analogy of bootstraps for those who lack, coming from the same ones that'll spew obtuse facts, hang you from a noose rack, and charge your next of kin a use tax. It's proven time. If you're doing fine, you're stuck in a consuming bind. Time to focus more on humankind and not remain human blind. No more war or poverty, but true sovereignty. No more racism or hunger as corporations plunder. Homes for everyone and mental instability will give way to mental ability. No more political corruption, no more climate critical disruption. No more war or poverty, but true sovereignty. No more racism or hunger as corporations plunder. Homes for everyone and mental instability will give way to mental ability. No more political corruption, no more climate critical disruption. Thanks.
Fantastic. You're channeling the global working class visually and with sick words. So thank you for that. We'll now have a short video from our sister organization, the Revolutionary Socialist Organization of Germany and Austria, the RSO. Like here in the US, the German people are facing privatization in public services. Clea, an activist with the RSO, is talking to us in front of public housing that was sold to a private corporation by the German government in Berlin.
Hello.
Hi, and greetings from the Revolutionary Socialist Organization in Berlin. We are currently here in the very center of Berlin at Cottbusser Tor, which is in Kreuzberg. And this is the place where most of the rental protests during the last years took place. It was a protest mostly by residents living around here in the social buildings and social housings around. Or at least you can say the former social buildings, because the Berlin state sold them to private real estate groups some years ago. And so the people were confronted with raising rents and got together in this house, Gecikondo, which is a Turkish word, which means like place where you come together and discuss, and which is also based on the big Turkish community living around here. And the people got together and protested against the raising rents and all the problems that come with gentrification. And that culminated in a referendum last autumn where the population of Berlin could decide whether they want to expropriate the real estate groups and give the housings back to the Berlin state under the residents' control. 60% of the Berlin people said yes to that, but still the mayor of Berlin said no, because she, a politician of the Social Democratic Party, is not there for it. She said expropriation is crossing a red line. People want that red line to be crossed. And also there are other fights in Berlin and in Germany. We have strikes in the hospitals because still after the pandemic there's nothing changing. And in Berlin they striked last autumn for more than 2 months, and now today in the hospitals in Western Germany strikes are starting too. And also another topic right now in Berlin is the war in Ukraine, because it's roughly 2,000 kilometers away from here, and people are fleeing and coming here, fleeing from a horrible war. And we say, as of the 1st of May, we will have nothing, no war, but class war. And we wish a happy May Day from Berlin und hoch die internationale Solidarität.
Great, thank you. And we have some German comrades here, so thank you also for joining us. And we always get to see a different section of different cities in Berlin. It's great. Now we're very happy to hear from a comrade from the Workers' Party, or Partido Obrero of Argentina, Guillermo Kane. He lives in the capital of Argentina, Buenos Aires, and he'll tell us about the situation facing workers in Argentina. Thank you for joining us, Guillermo.
Hi, hello. Well, thank you for inviting us to your event for May Day, for International Workers' Day. I'm on the highway right now, returning to Buenos Aires from San Nicolás, which is an industrial city in the north part of the province of Buenos Aires, where we've just had one of the dozens of rallies we're holding throughout the country. In this one, there were about 1,000 workers, mostly unemployed workers, who are part of the Polo Obrero, which is an organization promoted by the Workers' Party, which groups unemployed workers in neighborhoods, and which is grown very rapidly throughout the country. And this particular industrial city going in, during the pandemic from about 50 members to 2,000 in these months. And in this rally that I ended a couple of hours ago, there were, of course, flags with many of the same slogans that you have mentioned: war against war, work for unemployed workers, demands for wages to cover the living wages in a country that is racked by inflation, the devaluation of the peso, and especially the austerity measures, which have become much more violent after the agreement between our government and the main bourgeois right-wing opposition that voted in the Congress with the IMF. This economic and social situation is going towards a big crisis in our country, and this is having the effect of a division in the government, where a part of the congressmen and senators of the officialist of the governing party voted against the agreement, trying to save face and not take responsibility for the unemployment, the poverty, and the inflation and the austerity measures that the government is carrying out after being defeated in the elections last year. Both the main right-wing opposition and the government forces lost millions of votes in last year's election. Those who grew are, on the one hand, the left unity front, which the Workers' Party is one of the members of, which was the third force on a national level. And we also have a rapid growth of an ultra-right, so-called libertarian sector, which a part of the media and bosses are promoting, and which has, for example, promotes a dollarization of the economy, closing down the Argentine central bank and having the dollar as the only currency here, and a very repressive policy against workers that come out and demonstrate. They call themselves libertarian, but are pushing for a police state and are very present every day in the media, calling for repression against workers, in particular unemployed workers, which are in this moment the most mobilized sector in Argentina. In the elections, we have the left unity front has grown in different working class sectors of the country to above 10% and up to 25% of the votes, and have an increasing political representation, both on the local level, in state legislatures, and in the National Congress. This is linked to what I was saying at the beginning of a huge growth, especially in the unemployed workers' unions, and important positions in unions as well, in trade unions, in factories, but where the dominating situation is still that the trade union bureaucracy, which is allied to the government, is able to contain wage strikes, which are only very localized. We are working strongly to try to unite sectors of the employed working class with the unemployed workers whose national plans of action have already forced the government to give subsidies for unemployed workers in the last few months after an attempt to try to corner the unemployed workers movement through repression, which failed. And in these next few weeks, there will be a federal march coming towards Buenos Aires from cities all over the country of unemployed workers headed by the Polo Obrero and other organizations. The left front, which is the union mainly of 4 Trotskyist parties, we think has to play a vital role to play in the national crisis that is opening up. It has to maintain electoral unity of the left and at the same time be a bloc in actual common organizing in the unions, in the neighborhoods, and in the student centers in a situation where the class struggle is becoming more and more active, as has happened in many countries in Latin America affected by the capitalist crisis and the austerity plans carried out by the IMF. Tomorrow, we think over 30,000 workers will be in the Plaza de Mayo, in the main political center of the city of Buenos Aires. There will also be a rally in support of the government by organizations that are co-opted by the state. So there will be 2 main rallies in the city of Buenos Aires, one of revolutionary socialists and one of social organizations that are tied to the state through Peronism and through the Catholic Church. But this is the sort of political polarization that is going on in the working class in our country. On an international level, we want to point out the importance of internationalist meetings such as these and working on international relationships in moments where we are very concerned about the lack of an independent center of the left, of revolutionary left on an international level, and this is costing us greatly. The war in Ukraine, which we condemn, there is no progressive content to the actions of the Putin government, which carries out capitalist restoration and capitalist privilege within Russia. At the same time, we think that to understand the war in Ukraine, one cannot hide that NATO and the European Union have an aggressive policy of trying to occupy Eastern Europe, force a ring around Russia to try to break that Bonapartist national bourgeois government and to be able to exercise direct imperialist control over Russia as well as over China. This is the agenda that both US and European imperialism are carrying out. And it is important for revolutionaries who, while condemning Putin's war, to not side with NATO. We are alarmed by positions on the international left, which seem to be at times almost supportive of imperialist troops operating directly or indirectly in Eastern Europe and pressuring on China. At the same time, we think the problem of political independence is sharp in this moment in countries like France and the United States as well. The comrade from France mentioned the difference between the MPA in France, between sectors favoring Mélenchon and voting for Macron, choosing one of the 2 bourgeois options, while millions of French youths and workers chose to abstain, agreeing with the idea of neither Macron nor Le Pen. At the same time, in the US, we see thousands of valuable activists taken through left groups to supporting a wing of the Democratic Party. So while we see great possibilities for revolutionary action and intervention in the class struggle in our own country and over the world, because the capitalist crisis takes us again to situations of catastrophe, situations of war, and shows us that socialism is the only option. We need more than ever to regroup independent, revolutionary, leftist organizations based on class independence, because through Sanders, through Mélenchon, and through critical support of NATO, the working class will not advance, but are under our own banners. So with these ideas and with these debates, we thank you very much for the invitation. Long live May Day, and thank you very much to the comrades from Speak Out Now.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing about the situation there. And it's certainly our same goal as well. So I'm glad that we can have so many activists and revolutionaries from many different places. So certainly, as we can see, the future is full of possibilities, and we hope that we can all be active together in the fight for socialism. Winning the world humanity deserves is truly up to all of us. Before we end, take note of links that will be posted in the chat. The website is a useful tool to find a socialist perspective, so make sure to keep an eye on that. And if you're not connected to us, please reach out, sign up for our email list, follow us on social media, and see how you can get involved. Make sure to stay tuned for future events, and like I said, reach out, especially just to hear about the next upcoming events. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're not having an organized discussion for this event. So if you're already connected to kind of after discussion, those will take place, but we'll also have a discussion at this same link. So if you're new and want to find out more information about our organization, or if you'd just like to have some discussion on the ideas and the events that we heard about today, then please stick around. We're going to play the Internationale and then take a 10-minute break so people can have time to grab a snack and come back. And like I said, it'll be at the same link. So with that, we're going to share the Internationale. It's the anthem of the International Socialist Movement. It was first written in 1871 and is now one of the most widely translated songs in history. So you can see how universal its message is. So happy May Day, everyone. And thank you all again for coming and sharing.
Just right before I push play, I just want to remind people that this version of the Internationale is the original lyrics that were written right around the time of the Paris Commune in 1871. And it may not always be the most familiar lyrics that you know.
Arise, ye workers, from your slumbers. Arise, ye prisoners of want. For reason and revolt now thunders, and at last ends the age of cant. Away with all your superstition, servile masses, arise, arise. We'll change henceforth the old tradition, we'll spurn the dust to win the prize. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. No more deluded by reaction, on tyrants only will make war. The soldiers too will take strike action, they'll break ranks, they'll fight no more. And if those cannibals keep trying to sacrifice us to their pride, they soon shall hear the bullets flying. We'll shoot the generals on our own side. Ah, so comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. Ah, so comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. No Saviour from on high delivers, no faith have we in Prince or Peer. Our own right hand the chains must shiver, chains of hatred, greed and fear. Ere the thieves will out with their booty and give to all a happier lot. Each at the forge must do their duty, and will strike while the iron is hot. As a comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. As the comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. The Internationale unites the human race.